Wait 10 seconds. Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for joining. I appreciate everyone's turnout. We're going to hang tight for just another minute or two while more people are coming. I believe there should be a poll question that's going to go out if you want to partake in that while we're waiting. Additionally, I want to tell everyone, there's going to be a giveaway at some point during the presentation. So, stay tuned, and it'll be first in, first correct answer in the chat window will win a prize. So stay tuned for that. Wait for just another minute, and then we'll get things underway. Also, a little bit for accounting or for logistics for the Grubhub gift card. Few things we had 500 registrants, so that's great. We appreciate the turnout. Remember, the first 200 were going to get the Grubhub gift card, so that may be an issue. But for those of you that were qualified, you should have received an email, or you'll be receiving an email tomorrow. But if you log into your Grubhub account through the email that you're registered with, you'll see that the $25 credit will be in your account. I feel like a few people have already done that. I've seen them go through, but be sure to log in with the email that you registered with. If you have any questions, you can reach out to our team directly, and we'll try to straighten out if there's anything missing. All right, so I think we're good here. I think we have 6 joining. We'll probably have a few more stragglers coming in, but I want to get this underway if that works for everyone. So joining us in this episode of our virtual security series, the Rise of Cloud Exploitation. This is brought to you by Good Dog Communications in partnership with Verizon and Edgio. So some of you may have joined us for previous events, like our SASE as a service, zero trust approach, or our session that we did with Kevin Conklin of the FBI, where we talked through state of breaches. Today is going to be a really great event. We have some powerful speakers. The goal of these events, once again, is to really bring thought leaders, bring unique perspectives to allow you to make great decisions and remain educated. So we're going to jump into a little bit about our team. Our team has been around for 7 years as Good Dog Communications. We handle everything from network transformations, contact center migrations, managed SOC SIMs. We've kind of seen a lot, done a lot. 2 special shout outs, one to new hire Josh Greenberg, who's come on to kind of take over the cloud security market because it is such a high demand lately. Looking forward to his expertise, and also to our own Colleen Mangold, who just got her cybersecurity master's degree on Friday. So congratulations, Colleen. Moving on. So our clients range from CMMC 2.0 compliant teams that are dealing with the Department of Defense to startups that really have no security expertise, and they're coming to us to kind of build a practice from scratch, right? So there is no end to the possibilities. I don't know if anyone wants to chime in the chat if you can guess that movie. I feel like the Jim Carrey cable at the bottom might be a giveaway, but one of my favorites. Moving forward, with evolving threats, getting new perspective is paramount. One thing I've found in dealing with all these different level of organizations is, no matter how much expertise and manpower you have, you can't go wrong with adding more brain power to the equation. And that's what we're here for, is to really kind of get you aligned, leverage our relationships, and get the right people in front of you that are going to add value and help you, feel confident about some of the heavy decisions that I know we're all burdened with. So why focus in on cloud exploitation? With a 48% increase in cloud attacks from 21 to 22, it's a multi-trillion dollar industry. The attackers are going to go where the money is. Almost every conversation we're on, there's a tie to AWS, there's a tie to Azure, multi-cloud, there's hybrid. So we really want to bring some experts in that can shed some light on, the open source applications that you're using, the threat actors that are out there. We know these attacks are not cheap. With over, the new average is 3.86 million per data breach. It pays to be diligent, and it pays to be mindful of these environments and get as much manpower associated with these as possible. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our first guest speaker today, Jim Meehan. He's our Associate Director of Global Investigations Threat Intelligence at Verizon. Jim has spent time with the Secret Service. He's been the guy that sits down and interrogates some of these threat actors that have been apprehended, and has just tremendous experience. You can read through this. We posted it out, but without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to.
Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate the introduction. Appreciate the time to be on this webinar today. As you mentioned, as we go through these things, I'm going to be pulling out some slides from the Verizon data breach report that just came out in the beginning of June. If anybody's seen that or heard of it, the DBIR itself is over 100 some odd pages. There's also an executive copy of it, which is a lot shorter. But again, as we look through different parts of the DBIR, when I was with the Secret Service, we would grab somebody that was a criminal, catch them traveling, have a warrant on them, bring them in, interview them, no interrogation. But as we went through talking to them, quite often they would tell us who they targeted. You'd have them arrested for a couple of hacks, but 9 times out of 10, they had a couple other hacks that weren't attributed to them, but they would kind of divulge that information when they were trying to work off some federal sentencing time. So as you look at these criminals, they would tell us, how they targeted the business, why they targeted the business, what they used as the attack surface to go after them. So, as we look at the first slide, who are the culprits, right? It's organized crime. It's been that way for a long time. Couple things to this, though, is obviously a lot of these threat actors can work in countries that are corrupt. They can sit where the law enforcement's not going to touch them. They can launch attacks every day. So everybody always comes and says, well, how do I protect ourselves? That's the key thing. And if you look currently every single day, there's another hack, whether it be ransomware, whether it be business email compromise. And looking at business email compromise, it's not as maybe put out in the public, via the news sources, because ransomware has really gained the attention of a lot of people, especially when you have these ones that, for example, Colonial Pipeline, where it starts to affect, the infrastructure in the United States. With that being said, business email compromise, there's billions of dollars in loss in that every year also. So as I always talk about ransomware and the different threats that are out there, don't forget about business email compromise. But again, who's our culprits? It's always the financial gain. So you look at your traditional, who are the bad guys? Who's your threat actors? You have the hacktivists, the nation state actors, financial gain actors. And then you also have an insider threat. There's a new wrinkle to insider threat where there's a group called Lapsus, and what they'll do is pay you $10,000 to talk about a day at the office. So no longer, if I'm an insider, I no longer have to exfil data from my system. I don't have to get on my laptop or hack into a server and send that information to another location. I could actually just take pictures, screenshots, things along those lines where I'm not exfilling data, and just again walk them through the day of what VPN do I use? Do I use 2-factor authentication? You know, what do my credentials look like? Things along those lines. So it's a lot of information. These threat actors, they'll target your business. They'll do open source reporting. So they're going to look at, you know, your business, who's your C-suite, who's your board of directors. They're going to read everything about those people. You know, if you go to your business's help wanted when you're posting for IT, the IT group, you're more than likely going to mention what software you use, you know, what kind of code you use, things along those lines. All that information, yes, you need that to hire somebody or to get good applicants. But remember that the threat act is using that to gain information about your business. That's what they want to do, gain as much information as they can. Again, we started to see a blending of nation state with the financial gain threat actors. If you think of a country such as North Korea, where, you know, they're hit with so many sanctions that they need to raise money somehow, you know, cybercrime is a way of doing it. It's a group called Lazarus. They do a lot of ransomware, things along those lines. So again, nation state threat actors are blending right in with that financial gain because it's a kind of a mix. Hey, not only do we do an espionage, but we also need to get financial gain, and this is a venue of doing it. Again, as you look at the motives, money makes the world go round. But again, the number two is espionage, and that could be for your insider threat also. So it's something else to keep mind of. So the main gist here is, you know, knowing your business, know who your enemy is going to be. Your business may not be the number one target for hacktivists, but you may be, you know, almost everybody's going to be a target for financial gain threat actors. Depends on your industry if you're going to be a nation state target. And then again, the insider threat, that goes across the gamut. Even in the government, there's been insiders. So think of, you know, your business and then know your enemy. Once you know your enemy, then it makes it a little bit easier to figure out solutions that are going to help protect you. If you understand their tactics and their procedures, that's going to help you kind of build your defense. Oh, you talk about defense in depth. If you think about established government buildings, you know, there's different layers of physical barriers getting into a government building. You want to do the same thing as you're protecting your infrastructure, whether that be, you know, on-prem servers or cloud, right? So cloud is being what we're talking about here mostly. And I'm going to talk to the different ways in, again, based on the DBIR. If I can have the next slide, please. So again, you know, how are threat actors getting in? One of the top things is human element, right? It's, you know, could be error, could be privilege misuse, you know, stolen credentials, social engineering, all these things. So if you, again, think about these threat actors that are operating in states that they're not going to be harassed by the local government or local law enforcement, and they can throw their attacks out every day. Basically, whether they're throwing out phishing attacks, things along those lines. They can sit and launch 2,000 emails, phishing emails to your company every single day, and they just need one person to click on that. And once they click on it, obviously it opens up the keys to the kingdom for them. As we go through this, you know, remember not only on your towers, laptops, servers, things along those lines, but also remember your mobile devices, right? Your mobile device for a business, same as a computer. Threat actors know that quite often you're on your phone, you're multitasking. You're not supposed to be, but you're probably driving, standing in line, getting a cup of coffee, you're out to lunch. You're not going to pay as much attention to, you know, an attack on your phone as you would in the office, where you maybe hover over the email address and see if it's legitimate. So again, threat actors go to where they know they're going to be successful. Number of them that we had interviewed, they all said the same thing. If I can work 4 hours a day and get into 10 or 15 businesses, I'm going to do that. I don't really want to work 8 hours a day. They're human also, right? And they're human and they make mistakes. So again, same way that humans make mistakes on the defensive side, they make mistakes on the offensive side, and that's normally how they get caught. Again, 83% external. Again, I think that stats are stats. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of external, but I do think, you know, that the internal insider threat is going to be a challenge in the next few years. Next, please. So the ways in, again, credentials. So if you look at the evolution of the attackers, you know, work the target case or work the TJ Maxx case, which was TJX was the parent company, which tied into Wet Seal, 7-Eleven, a number of other attacks. So back then, they would have these loosely affiliated groups. One of them was in Romania, one of them was in Latvia, another was in Russia, another in Ukraine, and a handful in the United States. Well, they based their attacks in the United States. So for TJX, basically, they did war driving. They sat out in a parking lot. They had an antenna, and they were actually pulling down the credit cards via Wi-Fi attacks. But what they did is they created their group to have Wi-Fi attacks. Another person could do SQL injections. Another person, all they would do is launch phishing attacks. So they kind of had their specialized skills. And that's how that group operated. They're very successful at what they did. And again, they were international. They shared information. They talked all the time. It was interesting to read their chats and see, hey, I hacked in this company. I don't really know what it is. And the guy in the United States would say, hey, this is what it is. This is the kind of place it is. They probably have a lot of credit cards. So they attacked a number of businesses to get credit cards. Then they said, where do all these credit cards go? Well, they go to a credit card processor. So then they started attacking the credit card processors because they figured if they get hacked, a credit card processor, now a view of hundreds of businesses putting credit cards into that location, again, going to the one point where all the data that they want to steal is at and attacking that position, it saves them from hacking into 100 different businesses. Same thing that they do with remote access. Go hack one business, which is what they used to do back in the day. It takes a lot of time. What they started to realize is somebody has a remote access into 20 businesses. They want to hack that business. So you got to, look at your supply chain, right? Who has access to your business? Who has remote access to your business? Those all become threats to you. And the threat actors, again, know that if they hit one business that has remote access into 10 businesses, they just hack 10 businesses. Continuing that evolution, now what they're doing is they've gone to splitting up their groups into one group. All they do is access. They're called access brokers. So they hack into businesses all day long. That's all they do. So again, they do that recon I was talking about, open source reporting. Attack, steal access. They take the credentials, or they can sell stolen credentials on the dark market, however they want to do it. Then they sell that to another business or another part of the team, and that part of the team does lateral movement. They automatically create doors once they get in. So again, if you've been breached and you're doing an investigation, once you find out how they got in, you want to clean your whole network. You want to ensure that there's no back doors that were created. That's one of the first steps that they do as soon as they get in case they get caught. Another group is going to escalate their privileges. Another group is going to exfil the data. And if they're going to hit you with ransomware, the last group sends in the malware that's going to create the ransomware attack. And then with that, they're going to start negotiating with you. They also have services. So if I'm not a very skilled cyber threat actor, I can go in the dark market and I could buy DDoS as a service. So I can launch DDoS attacks. I could buy a kit for a couple $100. I can have them do everything and just split the proceeds. I pick the target, make the attack, and then, again, splitting the proceeds with that one group that all they do all day is DDoS attacks. Ransomware is a service. So if I'm not in a ransomware gang, but I want to attack somebody and launch a ransomware attack, I can kind of franchise from another one of the big ransomware groups. Some do, some don't. Some only do because they want their brand to be, known as a group that means business, and they're going to give you back your data if you want. So they're not going to mess with the smaller attackers. But there are other groups that kind of franchisees out the ransomware. So again, stolen credentials, that's the keys to the kingdom. Personal information is something that they always want because they can sell that readily on the market. But again, anytime you have stolen credentials, that's another big money maker for the criminals. They want to monetize every piece of data that they have. Again, phishing and exploit vulnerabilities in it. Richard's going to follow up with talking about credentials. I'm privileged to be on this panel with Richard, and again, he'll do a little bit deeper dive there. Next slide, please. So again, miscellaneous errors. So the good news is miscellaneous errors have gone down to 9%, where last year was 13%. We believe that the statistic is based on the fact that as people move into the cloud, they're getting better at it. As they move to the cloud, the businesses are working in conjunction with each other. There was a mad rush to go to the cloud, and a lot of groups moved to the cloud. but they had exposed C2 buckets. So, some of the things that were out there was exposed buckets that the criminals are constantly searching, they're constantly scanning, constantly looking for something that's out there that they can attack, whether that be a port that's open or a C2 bucket that's exposed, things along those lines. But now as we're getting more comfortable moving to the cloud and people find out more issues, kind of lessons learned type of thing, that's knocking down the miscellaneous errors. So if there is something good coming out of DBIR, the miscellaneous errors have gone down a little. So next slide, please. So as you look at your key security measures, again, I talked about knowing who your threat actors are that are going to come after your business. How do you protect yourself, especially when you're talking about cloud? Key things that I always stress is if always have backups, and they have to be air gapped. Criminals knew that people had backups, and they attack those backups when they hit you with ransomware or they go after looking for more information. But one of the key things is the evolution of wiperware, where they're just going to wipe out all your data. Again, if they do a wiperware attack on you and you don't have any air gap backups, you're going to lose all your data. But you want to have it air gapped and ensure that you have those backups. Something, we've always talked about backups, but ensure that they're air gapped. Doesn't do you any good if you have backups that are connected to the front end. Ensure you have the correct configuration, right? I talked about miscellaneous errors. That's one of the things you want to do. Ensure that that your cloud is set up and configured properly. And then once you do that, maybe do a pen test, or have an outside looking in to how you set up your cloud environment and ensure that it is protected. Again, who's responsible for the security of your cloud? Is it the provider? Is it your company? Or is it a hybrid where the provider has some security controls and you have the other security controls? Read the contract when you're working with a cloud provider. Ensure you understand who's responsible for what. And then again, with that being said, make sure that everybody knows their line in the sand and where they go to. Ensure that you have policies, tools, procedures. Again, that vigilance I'm talking about, by knowing your enemy, knowing the latest threats that are out there. Have some kind of threat intelligence team so you know what the latest and greatest attacks are out there. Again, the threat actors are going to change their tactics as they see responses, whether it be from law enforcement. If you talk about law enforcement, Treasury is now putting sanctions on some of these ransomware gangs. So it slowed down their payments. One of the things they do is then they go underground for a little while and they pop up and they have a new name. So you'll see where the ransomware attackers get sanctioned. Immediately they shut down business for about a month or two, and then they pop up with another name. So Treasury has to go through a whole new process to sanction that new group. Again, you want to know, what are these threat actors doing? What ransomware groups are out there? How are they attacking? Again, threat intelligence, really saves your business a lot of problems in the long run. And then again, education. We always talk about education with phishing. Ensure that your employees are constantly kept up to date with the latest threats that are out there, and stress how important it is. Some people, mandatory training, things along those lines. But you want to ensure that you're it used to be the old days, if somebody clicked on a phishing link, they usually got in trouble and things along those lines. You don't want to get employees in trouble for reporting and phishing. You want them to report as soon as possible. So you kind of want to have that mentality also. And then patch and multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is not always easy to implement. But again, the more bumps that you can create, the more hurdles for the criminals to have to deal with. They may just move away if it becomes really a time-consuming attack. They'll move to the next business that doesn't have 2FA. And then again, patching, very important to do patching. In the data breach report, we talk about Log4j. Could have been a lot worse, but a lot of companies found out about it and they patched really quick. And again, Richard's going to talk to that. So without further ado, I kind of did the warm up, and I'd like to hand it off to Richard. And again, thank you for your time.
All right, thanks,
Great.
Jim.
Thanks.
Thanks. Go ahead, Anthony.
Sorry, I was going to give you a quick intro. Yeah, so Richard Yu is our next guest speaker. With Edgio being the director of product management, he deals with so many endpoints and what Edgio has visibility into. Very excited to have Richard on the call to talk about open source applications, zero-day attacks, and some of the other pieces around the credentials that Jim had alluded to as well. So, without further ado, here we go, Rich, after you.
Thanks for the intro, Anthony. Thanks, Jim. I think it's great openings to my next segments. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for being here, all of you. So today I'm going to focus more into the open source. The fact that there's been an overwhelming usage of open source software and some of the potential web security threats that's going to be happening. Whether you're cloud-based, hybrid infrastructures, like this is something that's been growing and markets. So before going into detail, by the way, so what I'm presenting today is sort of in a high level stats and solutions, but feel free to engage with our team. If you want to have a deeper dive, we're always happy to engage with all of you, after the event. But let's take a look at just a recap on like some of the impacts with the cyber attack, especially in terms of cost, monetary cost as well as time. Like when I was doing some researches, right? We found that the losses from cyber attacks, it's as high as 6 trillion when it comes to economy impact. This is actually estimated to grow to like 10 trillion. And I was actually surprised because when I did my research, I was in Japan, so I have to make sure this is 6 trillion yen or 6 trillion US dollar. It turns out it's $6 trillion. So yes, it's a mind-blowing numbers. But when it comes to like data breaches, which is what we're talking today, right? Again, there's various sources, but it's usually in the ballpark of like $3 to $4.5 million, depending on which sources. But it just shows the significance of the like each like incidence of a breach event cost to a company. The numbers just here to show kind of like what is the disproportionate cost of this incidents happening compared to what an average organization invests into securing their web-facing applications, right? That's usually what we call any application that is handling HTTP traffic, any application that's accessible to the end user on the internet, right? And finally, we also show that according to our research, right, about $1 million, more than $1 million can be saved by a company who is able to contain a breach very quickly, especially as soon as it happens, able to mitigate any exploits and vulnerability when it first disclosed. I think, if a proper security automation is employed, we're able to cut down the average MTTD and MDR, or mean time to detect and mean time to respond, by a total of 77 days. I'm going to go into that a little bit more in my next few slides. I think we can move on to the next one. All right, so a bit of recap, as Jim mentions, right, Verizon just came out with the latest 2023 DBIR, has really a lot of great content. I would say this is definitely an authoritative report for if you want to learn everything about a data breach in any environment, especially for cloud services. And one of the most prevalent one that highlighted in the report is that web applications, as in pretty much most of the applications that we're using nowadays, especially after COVID, everybody is pretty much running on web apps, enterprise apps, or just you name it, any direct consumer web applications. They're actually the biggest vectors of breaches and incidents. This is the applications that get breached the most, obviously, because this application contains most user data as well as user credential, right? And this is obviously the number one assets in terms of like the targeted breaches. So it's very important to have a solutions and methods to actually protect. And well, of course, like before you protect them, you got to get visibility on what are the kind of traffic, right? Are they good customers traffic? Are they junk traffic from the attacker? going in and out of your applications. That's usually present the biggest footprints of like web-facing footprint for your entire organizations. Next slide. So, when it comes to web applications, how are those web applications being built today? According to this is a very famous report from Synopsys, talks about open source security and risk assessments. That the data is mind-boggling. About 96% of all of the code bases today, for any like of the open source or web application out there contains open source software. Right. This is very important. I'm pretty sure a lot of you use Apache, Nginx, WordPress, like of any form, you name it, right? But what we also found is that there are a lot of code base contain at least one vulnerability, unpatched vulnerability, especially given the more popular the software is, right? The more it becomes a target, because again, like a breach of an open source software can be reused across different organizations that use the same open source software. Like Jim mentioned earlier, right? When you're in the jungles, right? There's a watering hole. Both the prey and the predator goes to the same, water source. So the same thing applies here. It's like just like organization use open source software. The threat, also follows the development of open source software and obviously works to expose more exploits and vulnerability to the open source softwares year over year. Speaking about open source or just vulnerability in general, we can go to the next segment. So according to MITRE, which is obviously the authority when it comes to like categorizing and scoring CVE, or we call it common vulnerability exploit or environments, right? So new CVE, if we just did a bit of research, right, and look at how many CVEs were disclosed every year, it's incredible to see that, especially somewhere between 2020 and 2022, right? The CVE, the number of CVEs is growing exponentially, which means the number of new exploits being disclosed in public is growing exponentially. I guess, I'm not sure if any of you still remember COVID. Is that still a thing? But, obviously the attackers, they don't take a break during the COVID. As you can see, like the massive growth of number of vulnerability disclosed was in 2022, where there's almost 25% year-over-year growth. I just took a look at the latest data in 2023. We're looking at about, in Q1 gives us about more than 7,000. So we're talking about at least a 28,000 new CVE that's going to get disclosed this year, which obviously is a new all-time high and also represent a continued double digits year-over-year growth. Now, why is this important? As you look at this chart, which I may not have represented it nicely, but this is an exponential curve, which means you're dealing with an exponential problem. So an exponential problems require exponential solutions. If we just look at our own organizations, does everybody's security organizations, personnel, as well as the security budget grows exponentially? The answer is most likely no, right? I would like to know how you do it if your security budget grows exponentially. We should discuss that. But the problem, however, the problem, the exploits are growing exponentially. So this requires new methods, whether in form of automations or better detection systems, right, to actually detect those. And among those vulnerabilities, includes various critical 0 days exploits. And we used to see those 0 days vulnerability like once or twice a year. It's usually like a big events that got everybody scrambling. Nowadays, we're seeing those like once or twice a quarter. I'm sure a lot of you still remember Log4j vividly. It happens in the middle of December. It was actually a series of whack-a-mole events where you thought you patch up one exploit. There's two more patches coming out, right, from Apaches, because the attacker is constantly trying to find new holes using the same exploits in various different places. So, like I said, the problems, like the attackers are moving fast. The vulnerability that the exploits are being perpetrated like fast. Like how do you actually respond very quickly to that, especially when you use a lot of open source applications. So here's a bit of a, we talk a lot about the problems. So I'd like to give a bit of a high level of best practices. Obviously, there's solutions, product, and capability out there today that actually help you achieve this goal. But the high level principle is that we're going to move faster than the attacker, right? In cybersecurity, a common concept is OODA loops, Observe, Orient, Decide, Act loop. This is a concept, popularized by this Air Force colonel. Well, he actually invented it. He doesn't popularize it. John Boyd, he's famous for being one of the guy who comes out of F-16 fighting Falcons. If any of the aviation enthusiasts here can probably know what I'm talking about. So Colonel John Boyd, invented this Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. It's like as a business, as a defender, as an attacker, whatever. Like in your day-to-day life, you're constantly going through this OODA loops. But the idea is that in order to get an upper hand on your adversary, you have to run a tighter loops than your competitor, than your adversary. In this case, this is the attackers. Now, many organizations invest a lot of money and resources on, the preventions of the security breaches, right? I think that there's a research that shows that most CISO disproportionately invest in the preventions, but we want to make sure that, using the NIST security framework, we want to make sure we invest appropriately and evenly across the rest, includes like detections and response. The average data, right? The average for mean time to detect of any new security vulnerability or breaches, happening in your organization is 200 days, which in my opinion, it's very long. We can certainly improve that as a whole, right? And the mean time to response, the exploits detected is about 70 days, right? That there's definitely ways to reduce those MTTD and MTTR, and that's something that we can talk about. But one of the good practice when it comes to reduce mean time to detect is make sure that you have a one place, single pane of glass for all of your traffic, all of your web traffic, all of your HTTP traffic going in and out of your network, right? Having a gateway, obviously it shouldn't be a single point of failure, so it has to be a massively scaled gateway that has a point of presence across every part of the world, close to every user in every metropolitan area, right? So that you get full visibility into everything that's going on in and out of your network, because you can't mitigate anything you can't see and detect. So this is definitely something important to investing in. And obviously, once you detect the event, right, you want to implement solutions, such as all aspect, web application API protections. Make sure that you're able to perform virtual patching. So a lot of people think about, hey, when Log4j happens, I just need to patch my servers, right? That they use the Log4j, or when like WordPress or like any like Confluence vulnerability happening, right? One way is to patch software, but there's actually a quicker way to do that through virtual patching. So for example, we can actually quickly come up with filters, and deploy them within minutes across the network to actually mitigate any of the ongoing exploit towards those security 0 days critical security vulnerability, and your teams can then have like a runway to actually patch your software without worrying about breaches. We can cover that in our next sections. All right, so when it comes to data breaches, right? Why does people hack web applications? As Jim mentioned earlier, it's great to have people like him and his background here, like with us today. I think one of the very important like key takeaway from the DBIR is that stolen credential is actually the number one most like important data variety that is stolen. In addition to personal data, right? Because like this is something you can quickly monetize. And for stolen credential, right? Obviously, you can actually use stolen credential to launch the next layers of attack. So, for examples, there are actually darknets where people shares or actually usually sell, right, lists of millions of stolen credentials. You guys can actually go look up whether your credential have been stolen with popular tools such as like Have I Been Pawned, right? And part of the reason why they're using this is just so that they can gain access to account, both within a direct-to-consumer software and web applications or an enterprise applications, such as anything that you use for your work that contains sensitive customers' data or corporate data. So it's very important to understand why stolen credential is very important. Why is this such a valuable piece of data when it comes to like a confidentiality breach? Why is this such an attractive data to be stolen by the attackers? And again, like when it comes to using this stolen credential, in the attack, most of this are perpetrated by scripts or bot. We call it malicious bot, right? But they're essentially just a simple scripts. Obviously, they're not R2D2 Star Wars robots, but they're just a piece of boring software. Sometimes they're sophisticated boring software that repeats an action, such as trying a username and password on a website over and over and over again. However, this is actually a growing threat. This, according to our research, right, from Okta Security, right, about 34% of the login attempts nowadays across all types of web applications are actually perpetrated by bot. They're not real human logins. They're people who tries to log in with stolen credential to try to gain access. We call it account takeover. To try to take over. Anybody who's ever had the Netflix account stolen, anybody who has their game account stolen knows what I'm talking about. All of this are perpetrated by bot. Again, this is actually one of the key results from a breach in the web applications. So again, like just to recap, when web app got breached, credential got stolen, and this is the next step of what the perpetrator would be doing. Let's move on. All right. Well, I just to be comprehensive, right? Because I do think that we're now living in a world where the attackers don't just launch one types of attack. If we're using military terms, we call it like the era as a combined armed warfare, right? So when your organization gets attacked, well, it's not just the bot attack. It's not just the exploits of critical 0 days vulnerability. Sometimes the attack precedes with a smokescreen in the form of DDoS attack, right? So sometimes the attacker will launch a good-sized DDoS attack to actually overwhelm your network or to actually overwhelm your radar. Just like in military, it's like they would drop chaff to create fake targets on your radar to divert your attention so that you're busy dealing with DDoS attack, because that represents the largest traffic spikes, where they launch more precision targeted application exploit. So it's always, as part of protecting your cloud infrastructures, always watch out for the DDoS attack. Just because you're in the cloud or in a hybrid environment doesn't mean you're not susceptible to be overwhelmed by DDoS attack. And here are some of the stats for the largest DDoS attack we've seen so far, from both from a network layer, like we're talking about 3.45 terabits per second, or from on the application layers, right? We're talking about 71 million requests per second. So obviously, for those of you who runs applications and databases, it's a rhetorical question for us all to ponder. Can our application actually handle 71 million queries per second? Most likely not. Most certainly not. So I just want to highlight, one of the most prominent threat actors nowadays, especially on the news these days, and they're well known for their DDoS attack, especially the application DDoS attack, right? It's QNet, which, as far as Anonymous Sudan, they have joined hand. These groups are, supposedly based out of Russia, and they're attacking for both financial and political reasons, but mainly political reasons, right? So, and this has been impacting various organizations ranging from, Europe, which is the first targeted regions, to Asia Pacific, to the U.S., the United States. If you heard the news of U.S. airports suffering outages due to DDoS attack somewhere around last October, where it brought down websites from LAX, Georgia airports, etc., that was perpetrated by the QNet attack through sophisticated application DDoS attack. All right. Well, we talk a lot about problems, right? So I just want to talk quickly, kind of cover at a high level what are some of the solutions. So when it comes to mitigating security vulnerabilities, like we need to be implementing a holistic model, right? We can't just say, well, let's just protect the applications without. It's going to start with the foundations. You got to make sure your critical infrastructure, your DNS, right, your servers are secure, right? Because otherwise, so if your DNS goes down, if no one can find your IPs, it doesn't matter how good of an application protections you have. And we got to ensure end-to-end data encryptions with your end user. Like that's the bare minimum to ensure the confidentiality of end user data, both at rest and in transit. We will make sure that we obscure your infrastructure, whether you're in AWS or in Azure. Surprising stats here. I guess GCP is not a very popular choice according to our audience, but it doesn't matter where you are. Make sure you hide your infrastructures from the attacker, from the internet. It doesn't need to be exposed. You use a proxy, a gateway to serve as a proxy for your web applications. Obviously that also provides the benefits of DDoS protections, which is something that's very important because it protects it and ensures the availability of your websites, right? And finally, you want to implement a sophisticated multi-layered applications protections, and ideally all of these protections happens in a place where you can control in a single pane of glass using either a user interface, an API, Terraform integrations, or automations, whatever you need, right, to ensure that you keep up to date with any emerging threats. So let's take this is going to be the final piece of content I'm going to be presenting today. So when it comes to actually implement a holistic web application security, right, you want to make sure that you have a multi-layered approach, like Jim mentioned earlier. You want to implement defense in depth, right? You can't just have a silver bullets for everything, right? You need to have a capability to provide access control, like most basic capability to blacklist or whitelist, or like allow list or deny list, an IP address, an ASN. You want to make sure you have an API gateway, right, to ensure that your API, which usually interacts directly with your backend, right, it's safe and secure and prevented from unauthorized access through positive security model. You want to ensure you protect yourself from application DDoS protection, right, attacks that hit your database directly. You want to make sure you get rid of the automated threat with bot management, and finally, you want to have the ability to provide virtual patching against any new security exploits, especially critical 0 days exploit that you may not be able to patch all of your servers very quickly on. And again, ideally, all of these things are consolidated and can be managed within a single pane of glass, and and you can operate them with API and any forms of security automations too. As well as have the ability to integrate with your security incidents event monitoring, as well as your security orchestrations tool. So that's the high level advice I would give, especially if you run a high stake web application and an API, especially if the main source of your revenues are online businesses. This is definitely a holistic security implementations that I would recommend. All right, I am going to be passing it back to you, Anthony, to introduce our next.
Yeah, hey, Richard, thanks so much, man. That was just a ton of information, and hopefully we've seen a lot of value here. Richard brings a ton of knowledge and experience. Hopefully some of those struck home, and they're about to step into the next stage. I warned everyone there's going to be a giveaway, so that's coming up. In order to win, you need to hit event chat, and you need to put the correct answer in there. So let's see, was everyone paying attention? I will read the question aloud. 34% of login attempts came from what in 2022? A, employees. B, bots. C, Elon Musk. Or D, foreign states. First person to answer correctly in the chat wins. The giveaway is this pretty nifty Bluetooth and USB microphone. There's a bit of a delay sometimes in the gap, but just have to put the right answer. Cool. Looks like we got a winner. Oh, it wasn't Elon Musk, Jesse. It was bots, malicious bots, and that looks like Josh was able to pull that out. So, Josh, we will get your information and we will get that mailed out to you. So, as we get to the end, I know we're coming up to the end of our segment here. We are going to introduce our final speaker. So, we have Jude Fils-Aimé, Managing Partner of Enterprise Security, and he's going to kind of inform us on how to stay ahead of the curve and some of the proactive things we should be thinking about. Jude, handing it off to you.
Hey, thank you, Anthony, and thank you everyone for attending this informational session here. Really appreciate you taking the time out to stay ahead of the curve. We had some great information, and thank you, Jim and Richard. I'm in great company here. And one of the things that we want to not necessarily impress you with, but impress upon you is the collaboration between Verizon and Edgio, and obviously partnering with Good Dog and Anthony and his team to make sure that you are aware of what the threats are, right? Not only what they are, but how to get ahead of them, how to remediate them, and how to protect your assets and your environments, and obviously focus on your core competencies. So I manage, as Anthony mentioned, a few business segments for Verizon. I see a wide swath of customers like yourselves. I'm engaged with all levels of the organization from a cybersecurity perspective, and trained as an engineer and as an architect and as an ethical hacker. And although that's not my day to day, I still employ the methodologies because what's that expression? To be a hacker, think like one, right? So to get really into understanding what the threats are from your perspective, from your environment, because some of them are slightly different depending on what segment you're in, depending on what your vertical is, depending on, again, the state of what the bad actor is after. We want to make sure that you are evaluating your environment, right? Because some of the tactics from a hacking perspective is, they're obviously scanning, they're enumerating your network, they're doing their recon from a social engineering perspective. But to kind of what Richard pointed out earlier, they want to deny one level of that CIA triad, right? The confidentiality, integrity, or the availability, right? Either from a DDoS, denial of service perspective, or looking at different networks to penetrate from a wireless perspective, a mobile perspective. But just as important, and one of the focuses of this conversation is from a cloud perspective and your web applications, right? So there's security in the cloud and security of the cloud. So making sure you evaluate your environment, understanding the architecture that you have, that you're going into, and what applications kind of fit best, where you maybe need to store up some of that posture. Testing, right? Because the bad actors are testing, right? They're probing, they're scanning, and they're doing their recon on not only just the networks, right, but of the personnel that's responsible for your environment. From a vulnerability perspective, and these are areas that Verizon and in combination with Edgio, we can help you, and obviously with Good Dog, help you throw up those areas. From a vulnerability perspective, one of the techniques, as I mentioned, is that as a bad actor, as a hacker, we're looking at doing some sort of vulnerability analysis, right? Where we're looking at the assessment of vulnerabilities in the systems and networks, right? Using different tools, techniques, tactics, techniques, and procedures to get access to your crown jewels, and to get exfil data, or to just deny you access and deny your customers access to your environment. And then, last but not least, from an assessment perspective, is making sure, because as we move more and more functions and applications and resources and databases and the like to the cloud, right? We've got to make sure that we know that environment. We have the personnel that is obviously trained up enough, right? Jim talked about the kind of leaky buckets in those environments, making sure that you have a good grasp of what the gaps are and how to fill them up. And then, from a kind of shoring up your bench strength, right? And this is what we do day to day, right? Jim, Richard and I, we are focused, eyebrow deep, right, in the threat. And it actually even, to the tip of my hair, if you will, from a cybersecurity perspective. So finding the right expertise, we know that there's a big gap in terms of bench strength, in terms of personnel to help fill those gaps. So partnering with the best of breed, the Verizons, the Edgios of the world, can help you kind of have us on your bench, so to speak, to help you make sure that you have the strong posture around those environments, right? And then just like you're doing now, attend this educational series. There are a lot more to come in partnership with Good Dog and Edgio and Verizon. You can catch this on any one of the media channels, LinkedIn, or even directly from your partners in the cybersecurity space. But just as important as all the things I just mentioned, take a break to educate not only yourselves but your team, right, bottom up and top down. Schedule a data breach investigations report, a review. We call them a readout, where after you've kind of done your homework and read the data breach investigations report, we will go through all the areas, and then you'll have more pointed questions around what Verizon has seen. We'll have folks like Jim and all the experts who help contribute and write the actual data breach investigations report, be able to give you the insight from their perspective and their work relative to not only cybersecurity, but the data breach investigations report in particular. And then last but not least, follow up with the team here. There's no way that we can cover, one of the things I've learned in my travels is you can't have a security conversation in just an hour. So follow up with the team here, schedule the one-on-one with us so that we can engage with you a bit deeper, and just give you a bit more insight into what we're seeing so you can have that insight, have that information. And as I mentioned, the best way to beat these threats or beat a hacker is to think like one. So we really appreciate your time. Hopefully you found value in this educational seminar. I can't thank the team enough. Richard, you're a scholar and a gentleman. Jim, you as well, my friend. Jim and I are on calls almost on a daily basis. And our friend Anthony, who helped pull this all together. So appreciate it. There is a doom and gloom. We get it, but there's hope, obviously. And we're here to support and here to help. So I'll hand it back to you, Anthony. And everyone, be safe and be well.
Hey, thanks so much, Jude. Yeah, and I like that statement. It's not all doom and gloom, right? We have a lot out there trying their best. So, so we're just going to open up to a bit of Q&A here. We have a few minutes left. We're going to hang on. If anyone has any questions, you can post in the chat. I have a few out here that I'm going to pose out just to kind of give us an extra few minutes of dialogue while you're thinking. So Jim, looking ahead, what kind of attacks do you think are going to be more prevalent over the next few years?
Yeah, so I think that as you go through, you look at that evolution of the threat actors, they're looking to be more and more efficient. I mean, I always say that they'd be a top 5 business if they're legitimate, sharing information, things along those lines. So a couple things that, that were talked upon during the presentation here is talk about the NIST framework, right? So one of the threat actors we had arrested, he said, hey, we read the NIST playbook. We understand how you're protecting yourself. The other thing that they do is they sit and wait for vulnerabilities to get posted. So again, one of their resources is information that's put out by researchers. So double-edged sword, remember that as you're getting information, whether it be Log4j or MoveIt or any of those types of things. Threat actors are seeing the same exact thing. And if you look at vulnerabilities, when the vulnerability is written up, it specifies exactly how that vulnerability can be attacked, right? So the threat actors are taking that information, and if they know your business has that software, you talked about Apache, it's an Apache Struts vulnerability, they're reading it they're taking it and they're moving because they know they have, as Richard mentioned earlier, patching is essential. But, the threat actors are telling us, I know, that I have 60 to 90 days to attack a vulnerability because it usually takes a company at least 60 to 90 days to patch a vulnerability if they do at all. So again, remember that all that information that's out there. And again, as businesses move to different locations, kind of touching on what Richard said too with the watering hole, right? They're going to go where businesses go. So you saw that evolution of when businesses start to move to the cloud, criminals move to the cloud. You start to look at now AI, right? AI had some great purposes, but they're also can be used for nefarious purposes. So anytime some new technique comes out, any kind of new technology, threat actors are going to take it, they're going to study it, and they're going to figure out how to use it for nefarious reasons. So again, I stress all the time, have a cyber threat intelligence team and ensure that they're passing all the information that you need to do so you can be on top of the latest.
So I highlighted them all. Do you want me to send them to you?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim. Yeah, no, sorry. Thanks very much for that. Next question, we're going to pose this one to Richard. What tools are best for managing some of these zero-day threats and attacks?
Yeah, that's a good questions. And thanks for the questions. When it comes to managing zero-day threat, right? That I usually say there's no silver bullets. There's a philosophy. Obviously, you want to be quick, right? You want to be quick. You want to be comprehensive, right? So when it comes to managing zero-day threat, having the quickest time to mitigate to those threats, or having the visibility, in those threats to begin with, is paramount. So like I mentioned, right? You definitely want to utilize and route all of your traffic. If your cloud infrastructure today is exposed to the internet directly, consider using a reverse proxy, ideally of a massively scaled reverse proxy, right? That serve as a layers of filter. This provides visibility on whether there's any new attacks in the wild that's hitting your sites, your applications, as soon as possible, right? On top of that, right, you also want to have the ability, many web application API protections solutions out there provide the ability to virtual patch your solution, so you definitely want to implement that. But obviously everybody has their own flavors, but ideally, if you have the ability to perform A/B testing, so for example, you have your productions traffic running that could potentially contains any live exploit that's already happening across your network, you want to be able to quickly implement the rules, see what is the effect of those rules, make sure that you tune down any false positive, right? Because you don't want to move too quickly that you cause yourself an availability problem by causing outages, by blocking any false positive with the attack. But the key is to implement solutions such as obviously there's a dual WAP solutions that we offer, right? As for you to be able to gain predictive data on your true production traffic, and just so that you're able to quickly implement any virtual patch on the proxy to mitigate any exploits while you organize your team around patching your software, like Jim mentioned earlier, right? 1 to 3 months just patch the software, but the attacker obviously is not gonna wait, right? As soon as the vulnerability is disclosed, we generally see them within the first day, first hours of disclosure. We see those exploits going through our network, attacking our customers, right? So you want to react as quickly, if not quicker, than your attacker to mitigate those issues.
No, thanks so much, Richard. This was, just great stuff, and we appreciate everyone's time here. I know we're over. Thanks everyone for attending, and obviously, we have these resources available. You'd mentioned things like personalized DBIR, reviews, and doing a web security assessment with the Edgio team. We'll be reaching out, and hopefully we can set up some more personalized sessions where we can really deep dive into what your posture is and, where maybe some of these solutions or minds can be injected to help you moving forward. So thanks again, everyone. I appreciate the time. And Rich and Jim and Jude, great stuff. Again, thanks again for everything. Verizon and Edgio, great partners. And looking forward to continue to drive the conversations.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank
And one last thing, just remember for the attendees, check your Grubhub account with what you registered under. I will see what we can do as far as we were limited to the amount of Grubhub gift cards that were sent. We'll be checking that on the back end, but you should have it in your account. You should have a $25 credit. Okay, thanks very much and have a great day. Goodbye.